In my time, I want to talk about race and wealth in the United States. And I want to very quickly run through the data that we're looking at, the measures, give a quick glimpse of a snapshot of what the most recent data looks like, what it looks like over a period of time. And then I want to dig in and kind of recirculate on some of the things that Matt Desmond was talking about in terms of the importance of housing ownership. And then I want to end, if I've got time, with a couple of challenges for all of us. But we start with needing a quick understanding of why looking at a family's financial wealth in the first place is so darn important. We've done in social sciences a lot of work over a lot of time looking at inequality primarily through the lens of what happens in the workplace and what happens when people can't work, substitutes for. And that's a great picture. We've learned even more about it today. I am going to stand before you and suggest that picture is very complete if we do not have a grasp on what that other major resource of family has, and that is its financial wealth. And that's really critical to help us fill out that picture and that story. I'm also going to suggest a few more provocative things around that by the time I close today. When we look at a family's financial wealth, we're essentially looking at everything it owns that has financial value minus all of its debts. And that should be sort of the proverbial bottom line for most families. In the literature, people tend to use it with two different measures. A net worth that includes the equity in the home, and liquid assets that excludes that. And there's a whole conversation we don't need to get into today about how one thinks about housing equity, because after all, it is the only financial asset that also has use value. It's not a stock, you can't just sell it. You've got to hopefully replace your housing in some. So, first bit of data, cross-sectional data, looking at data from 2013, a pretty good representative sample of the American population. At the median, at the 50th percentile, half above and half below, that white family has about $142,000 in financial in net wealth, including their home equity. The African American family, also at the 50th percentile, has about $11,000, same metric. The Hispanic family has about $13,700. A quick, easy, I think, ratio transformation of that data, I think, is much more provocative and much more accessible to public understanding. For every dollar of wealth that typical white family has, the typical African American family has 8 cents in wealth, and the Hispanic family has a little less than a dime in wealth. So as not just concerned scholars, but as citizens, we need to ask a couple of questions, which we won't go into in depth today. We need to ask, oh my gosh, how do we start with that? 8 cents on a dollar. How do we start with less than a dime on a dollar? What's the history? What's the legacy of that? And then how do we think about policies, transformations that are needed to move us towards parity? How do we define parity in that kind of situation? All right, this quickly is the cross-sectional data. And I think it's a pretty good capture of what we know. We also can look at data at the 75th percentile, the 90th percentile, and the ratios change. But a vast racial wealth gap is very, very persistent at all levels here. But what if we look at, sorry, let me not give away the mystery yet. What if we ask a different question? And Matt Desmond and one or two other people have kind of set it up in a way. What if we look at the United States post-1960s as having successfully passed some major civil rights pieces of legislation where proverbially, and don't laugh, a lot of people think that makes us now in a post-racial society. And shouldn't it be the case, I told you not to laugh, shouldn't it be the case that whatever the differences in starting point in 1965 or 66 is a part of that legacy? And whatever those differences are, over time, in one hypothesis, if it's really a post-racial society, should stay level. The gap remains, and it's a big gap. We're able to ask that, interrogate that question with some data from a panel study of income dynamics that follow the same set of families. It's not just comparing cross sections, but looking at families over a 29 period of time. And here's what we see: that gap in 1984. No trick about the year; it's just the first year the PSID got family information about financial assets and liabilities. It opens up at $84,000. Keeping those dollars constant, that gap triples by 2013 to $245,000. Something is happening at the deepest core of American society, our policy, our history, our institutional practices, where the starting point, even if we're able to disrupt that starting point, is only a starting point. And in terms of the racial wealth gap, that has grown quite considerably, again, looking at the same set of families. As Matt Desmond was suggesting, let me give a couple of data points here. America's vast middle class, from the 20th to the 80th percentile, just looking at the end there, 2/3 of our wealth is in home equity. That's how important home equity is in housing wealth. It's not in stocks and bonds. It's not in IRAs. It's not in our retirement accounts. It's in our home equity. Home ownership, then, residential segregation, becomes the most powerful structuring policy mechanism by which wealth is created for America's large middle class, defined in that way, with all of the social exclusions that I talk about in my work, and Matt Desmond and other folks talk about in their work as well. Let me jump quickly to the couple of challenges. And I do this with really the best of intentions in my heart here. Conversations to me today have struck me as somewhat bloodless, in that we've not yet connected what we're talking about to property, to wealth, to power. And I think bringing into that picture a family's wealth capacity and how it is able to use that capacity brings those dimensions that helps us, I think, to connect some of the dots. I think it's really quite challenging to talk about economic and social mobility, to talk about advantage and disadvantage, to talk about the rewards and lifestyle of the family without looking at that family's financial wealth. So I don't think it's so difficult, but I think we can add to our understanding to the traditional income poverty level something like an asset poverty index, and report on that and look at what that's doing in American society. Something fairly simple, taking what it takes to live at a poverty level for 3 months. What percent of American families are above or below that set poverty? I think we can add information like that to our standard understanding of what it's going to take to get a lot closer to equality in the United States. Thank you very much.